What's happening, Cardinal Nation? Welcome back to the Cardinal Call podcast, a leadership and learning classroom podcast that interviews expert leaders and is designed to help take your leadership and your learning to the next level. I am Dr. C. Sean Owens, also known by my moniker at the Professor Owens, where you can find me on most of my social media. And my co-host that I can't do this without, Dr. Andrew McCart. Dr. McCart, how you doing today?
Oh, Dr. Owens, I'm doing great. And it was wonderful getting the booth here and saddle up with you again for another ride into leadership and learning. And I know you've got an introduction lined up, but we have got a guest that I've been excited about this one ever since she agreed to do it. And we're going to get some good information. She's got a exciting job that she's taking care of here in our community. And I can't wait to learn more about how she's keeping it all together.
Hey, you are 100% correct. I think listen, I've been practicing saying how I was going to say this. So you know me, I'm always practicing my lines. But listen, the political landscape has seen a shift, right? In the United States, in our political landscape, we saw our very first minority woman who graduated from an HBCU be elevated and voted into a very prominent office. Well, our podcast landscape, I just want to let everybody know, we have done something very similar here on our podcast landscape. We have found a minority woman who is a CEO, right? Our first non-university related CEO. And she also is an HBCU grad. I'm telling you, you guys are going to be really, really blown away by what's about to happen. But before we get into our special guest, let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping. So if you or someone you know, right, desires to get a degree and lead with compassion and expertise in a changing world and get a degree from award-winning faculty within a nationally recognized program in the area of leadership and learning, you can find us at UofL.me/BSOLL-podcast. Again, that's UofL.me/BSOLL-podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, podcast listeners, Cardinal Nation, get your pens, your pencils, your notepads, your memos, your tech devices, get all those ready as we welcome our very special guest, the one, the only, Miss Evon Smith, CEO, HBCU grad, kicking off our Black History Month. We're doing some great things. Miss Smith, how you doing today?
I am wonderful. I just can't say enough about that introduction.
Hey, we want you to feel like $1 million here on the Cardinal Call podcast.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
So thanks for being here, and let's get started. Let's not waste any time. Let's jump into this right away. On this podcast, we talk about leadership, we talk about learning, and that's right, podcast listeners, you know we like to have a little bit of fun with our guests as well. But today, let's start with this. Ms. Smith, how do you define leadership?
For me, my leadership style is all about my faith, and I really come from a standpoint of being a servant leader. That is extremely important to me, and helping others to empower others and to make a space for others in the leadership model. So servant leadership is all of it for me.
Okay. Dr. McCart, you want to chime in on some servant leadership here?
Well, sure. I'd love to. And I think that's a great place to start this interview with the servant leadership. Evon, I was looking at the OneWest.org website, and I would encourage our listeners to go through there and look at it if they're not familiar with it. But one of the quotes off of there is some of your partners ask a question: how can we be a food city, a healthcare city, a tech city, a sports city, if 1/4 of the city is cut off, disconnected, and segregated? And I love the way that question was asked, and I would just like you to see if you could elaborate on that and how it fits in with your leadership philosophy with the mission that you have with OneWest.
Absolutely. So I have to just go back to the founders of OneWest and how that came about. So the 2014 Bingham Fellows class decided, as they came together as leaders to work on issues in the city, they decided that they wanted to work on the economic disparities that existed in the West End, and they wanted to work on economic development specifically. They polled the West End community and sat in on numerous meetings and had numerous listening sessions. And they understood that the West End residents specifically felt left behind in many ways. There was a mad exodus, as you all can imagine, over the past 30 years of significant industry. And as a result, many jobs were lost, as well as there were many studies done in the West End over that course of time. Study after study after study, the community got tired of participating in studies and had not seen action. And so when you look at 3/4 of Louisville prospering and thriving, and then you see this 1/4 quadrant void of many resources, you're talking about 350 city blocks, over 65,000 people, a majority African American, and you're seeing over 4,000 vacant and abandoned properties with a 30,000 person list of needing affordable housing. That is astronomical in a city of our size. We can do better. We know we can do better. And so with regard to the huge amount of disparity reflected there, you also have where OneWest did a spending analysis. And in that spending analysis, they had the Nielsen Group, national recognized group, do the analysis around the spending power of the West End. And basically, they were spending over $475 million a year, and 60% of that was being leaked out of the community. They were going to other areas to spend those dollars. So any retailer, any service provider would recognize that that's a significant amount of discretionary spending by any group of people, Black, white, brown, green, whatever. That is significant. And so therefore, that represented a huge business opportunity. And so when you understand that, then you start to understand, hey, why is this quadrant of the city suffering so? Why are they not being recognized for their value and their spending power in that regard and getting services that they need? And so then it begs to question, what kind of job have we done as leaders to make sure that we incorporate every aspect, every quadrant of our city, all the people in our city, to make sure that they benefit from the economic vibrancy that the city is realizing. And so this is all pre-pandemic, because of course now all of these numbers are elevated significantly in terms of the losses, the disparity, the hunger and the need, all of those numbers, and then the healthcare disparities, all of those numbers are exacerbated now by the pandemic. But it does beg the question, what are we doing as leaders to eradicate these issues? And so it calls us to another level of leadership, another level of attention must be paid, and we must be very strategic in how we approach these things. And that was the reason OneWest was developed, because we knew that there had to be a very focused approach to these issues.
Wow. Well, that's quite an answer there. There's a number of things there I'd like to comment on, but first of all, the 475 million, was that the correct number that you
Yes,
said?
sir.
That is a significant, and it's there's a lot of things we could go into with that, but I think anyone who would hear that number would agree that if some of that could just be used and not be leaving that community, as you said, there's a lot of power for change in that number and in those resources. That's incredible. Well, Dr. Owens, what did you glean from that, and what would you like to ask next?
Yeah, so when it comes to your leadership, obviously you told us a little bit about the history, how it started. I think it was back in 2014, what you mentioned. So now we're in 2021, we're coming out of a pandemic. Let me not say we're out of a pandemic. We're just kind of, I hope we're coming out of the pandemic. Let me be optimistic. Mm-hmm. And so as you've had to kind of sit through this, because from looking at your bio, you came in this position in 2018. So you saw pre-pandemic, right? You saw how the numbers and everything was fluctuating. You just alluded to how these numbers have skyrocketed. Can you give us a little bit of indicator of what it's like leading this organization? You know, we've kind of made it through 2020. We're just starting 2021. You say your numbers are they're up, but probably not in the right direction. Like, how are you leading? What's keeping you awake at night? How
Right.
is that going for you?
Well, I will say one, I'm not leading alone, which
Mhm.
is significant. So while I am the CEO and president and CEO, I serve under an amazing chairwoman, Miss Nikki Lanier, who is the president of the local Federal Reserve. Nikki Jackson Lanier has been a phenomenal leader and is an HBCU graduate as well. So my alma mater is Shaw University. Nikki's alma mater is Hampton
Nice.
University. And, we have lots of love for our schools and for our foundations because both schools definitely instilled in both of us the need to give back. And I will say that her leadership has provided me a lot of support and a lot of bandwidth to be able to do what it is I need to do in a city that I had prior to coming here had no familiarity with.
Hmm.
And so I will say that the board we have board seats of 31, of which we usually stay at 28 or so, and our goal is to fill all the seats. But having representation from each of the 9 neighborhoods that make up the West End is extremely important, along with having people from across the city in leadership roles that serve and have been serving for over 5 years together, meeting on a weekly basis since they were the 2014 Bingham Fellows class, and definitely working very hard to make a difference. So it's not my leadership by itself, but it is the leadership of the entire board and that commitment. They were leading collectively when it wasn't sexy to have a multicultural, multiracial group of people coming together in the West End. They took a lot of hits, a lot of attacks around what their ground floor motivations were for coming together. Were we going to gentrify? Were we going to, continue to just do business as usual as to what the West End residents have seen is a lot of studies, a lot of talk, and no real action. Well, I would venture to say that OneWest has been the type of initiative that we would all want to see happening for our organizations across the city, which is strong leadership of integrity, leadership with creativity, leadership with empathy. And that is what is getting us the level of results we're seeing today. Transparency is very high up on our list. We're always trying to work with local leaders in the neighborhoods to help them realize their goals. What do they see their neighborhoods and their community becoming? And then we also work with them around the things they don't want to see in the community any longer. So we don't act as their voice. We invite them to the tables that we are seeing are having discussions around what is to happen in these neighborhoods. And we invite the neighborhood leadership and residents and business owners to those tables to ensure that their voice is heard. That's the most important thing about community economic development, making sure the community is at the table. And that is why we also host quarterly meetings in the community with other developers. We invite other developers to come and talk to the community about their projects and anything that we're looking to do. We sit down with the community and talk to them about the projects. You all may remember the 2018, 2019 CNU Congress for New Urbanism came to town, and we were one of the sites that they had as a legacy project. We had over 200 community stakeholders, including the youth, because the youth are extremely important to everything we do, to talk about what could development look like in the Russell neighborhood where we are working, South 18th Street and West Broadway. What was the vision that the community had? And when you talk to folks from all walks of life that work in those areas and are stakeholders in those areas and live in those areas, that's when you really get to understand what the community would like to see happen and what their focus is. And last, I will say that is the other reason why you didn't see development start in terms of construction with OneWest until we understood what are the minority businesses that are in the community and capable of working on our projects. Who are they? What are their needs? What are their capacity? And then what do they need to be at the table and to participate in the projects?
Wow. That
That is a
is,
deeper dive you have not been able to make.
yeah, I understand that. And you had mentioned just a minute ago, you had mentioned as you were kind of telling your background, where you're from, you had mentioned that, you didn't necessarily, you're not a native Louisville, Kentuckian.
Right.
Let's just say that, right?
Right.
You come from what I gather, it seems like your home state is the state of North Carolina. Am I correct in making that assumption, or?
Well, actually, my home state is Massachusetts. So I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, and moved to North Carolina at 15. So roughly, I turned 15 in North Carolina. But all of my adult life, I've lived in North Carolina, and that was my dad's home state. So it's my home state now.
So starting in Massachusetts, going down to North Carolina, and now being in the great city of Louisville and the amazing state of Kentucky, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your leadership journey, how it started, where it evolved, how did you know you were a leader? Did you just wake up one day and it happened? I mean, you are a CEO. Like, give our listeners something to drool about.
Yeah, so I love to tell young people the truth. So I was slinging the mop at Hardee's in high school. My mother started charging me rent in 10th grade, and that was her insurance plan that I was going to leave home at some point. The rent went up every year. And so
Wow.
I went from there to banking, and I worked in item processing and worked my way up in the bank. So I was able to work my way up at First Citizens Bank, got into the management training program, had my own branch in my 20s, and was they tell me I was out producing my peers 3-1. And so when our kids talk about, and when I say our kids, when our African American kids talk about what they can and cannot do, I always want to encourage them, because even though I did not see many people, if any, like myself in management or even in the management training program, I knew that there had to be a way for me to be able to break that glass ceiling. I will tell you, I knew of one African American female in management, and I just kept thinking, I got to be able to get there. And so I kept moving up. It seemed like every year or every 2 years, until I became selected for the management training program. From there, I never applied for a job. From there, people always came to me with jobs and opportunities. And so it was that was how I moved into community economic development. But I will say, before I left banking, I became a mortgage specialist. And so it was actually my weakness when I first started out. I had to constantly get my loans reviewed. I had to constantly sit with the mortgage manager. And do you know that ultimately what I called then my shame became my strength?
Mm. Dr. McCart, you want to chime in on this?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Smith. These are great lessons for our leader, or for the listeners that are leaders in their own organizations. And one thing we talk a lot about in our classes is collaboration, and as you mentioned, getting people to the table. And I really like that you said that you're not leading alone, and creating empathy, building relationships. And another quote here from your website, it says on part of your bio, Smith will build relationships with government, nonprofit, business, and community organizations, and act as an advocate for responsible investment, financial commitments, and policies that impact West Louisville. So you've talked a little about this, but it seems like a lot of that kind of work is building trust and getting people familiar with one another. And so as a leader, how are you using those skills, and what are some of the results you're seeing of improving racial relations in the West End, and just creating that trust and opening those lines of communication? Can you tell us a little about that?
I think one of the ways is definitely through honesty. Being an authentic and transparent leader, not trying to make people think that we've all had it all together all of our lives. Young people are over that. And when we saw that with the honesty in the protests, just young people telling us, calling us on our mess, as leaders and adults in the community, they saw the hypocrisy from what we said to what we did. And so I think that that's one of the things that helps to build trust. If we're not undergirding and elevating Black leaders in the spaces and places where we work and helping young people to overcome obstacles and barriers, and if we're not breaking down systemic barriers, young people see that. And at some point they say, why am I continuing to bump my head up against this wall and nobody is moving? The other thing I will say is making a space for them at the table. They may not talk the way we talk or may not have had the same kind of upbringing or the background, but we've got to get to these tables and find common ground. One thing I used to love about Tupac and Biggie Smalls is that they kept trying to speak truth to power in their own words. And whether or not we were prepared to listen, we have to listen today, because guess what the young people did that none of the generations before them have done, which is they shut down the economic system of the United States of America in the major urban cores. And that is huge. And we don't want that to happen again. We need to listen and we need to grow from the lessons they've taught us. And so I will say that building trust is the number one way to do that. Making sure they are part of the economic vibrancy in every city, every small town, so that they too can realize what we call the American dream. And if you're going to educate people to a minimal level and expect them to participate in a highly evolving technological society, then you have missed a mark. And we've got to stop that. We've got to begin to bring everyone along so they can feed their families and see themselves with the integrity among their community, among their home life, and just personally. And I think that happens when you prepare people to succeed in their goals and their dreams. And so that's what I try to lead, where I try to lead from, is that point of common ground. What is the common ground? And I think everybody wants to be able to feed themselves and their families and to have shelter, just the basics, and then grow from there. And so I think that's what makes people understand that I'm serious about helping them realize their goals and their dreams at the same time that we're speaking truth to power with regard to federal government, state, local, and then the business community, and ultimately with our local businesses and residents.
Wow, I get excited just hearing you talk about these things, and it also helps us to know these are some things we try to talk about in our classes, and to hear a CEO in the city doing things like you're doing to verify that we're not just so out of touch professors as we get accused of sometimes. It's good that we're good to hear it from some real practitioner out there. And I think that idea of building trust and telling the truth, and young people will see through it if you don't. And I think sometimes leaders we're afraid to tell the truth because we're afraid of what the reaction will be. But the truth is the truth, and everybody knows it, whether we admit it or not. So it's better to get it out there. Then we can start working on a solution. I think that's what you were alluding to there, and what you all are doing with OneWest. Well, Dr. Owens, what do you think? Let's hand it back to you.
Man, listen, I'm going to call Miss Smith the evangelist in a minute, because she has me so motivated. I'm trying to volunteer on the organization as soon as we get off the podcast.
That's what
inspiring.
Exactly. Truly inspiring. You speak with such fire and such passion. And I don't want to get off the leadership topic, but we talk about, we kind of got that leadership in the bag, and there's some great nuggets for our listeners out there. But I want to segue just a little bit into our next topic about organizational learning. That is another prized component of what we do. And I just want some people out there to kind of understand. We've mentioned OneWest. We told you the website to go to, onewest.org. But if you could just kind of speak to some of the things that OneWest offers volunteers or employees to help them grow professionally, to kind of take them from where they are to maybe where they want to go. If you could just kind of elaborate on that and what One West has done, is doing, and maybe what they plan to do in the future.
Absolutely. So we operate from four pillars. We work on community engagement, advocacy, capacity building of local organizations and the people in the community, as well as commercial and retail development. So our goals are very clear. If there's someone in the community working on a particular area and they're doing it to a high level, we're not looking at duplicating or replicating those services. We collaborate with those groups, but someone can come on board and work with us as from a volunteer standpoint in community engagement. They might work on any one of our 10 or so committees that we have. We have real estate committee, we have finance, we have community engagement, we have other things like governance and what have you. So we have a lot of places where folks can get started. The most recent thing we're working on is the Plan Room, which is our business accelerator for minority contractors. And that has had 5 core partners, as well as we're reaching out across the state to bring resources together for minority contractors to help them build their capacity. And so this will be possibly incubator / accelerator number 4 for me in terms of my career and working with minority contractors. It has just been the number one way that I've seen to build wealth and equity within the minority community. And so I love this work. I appreciate it. And we have U of L and other groups standing with us, LCCC, 7 p.m., and most notably, I would say KPFF, local engineering firm, Greg Bucola, had the vision to really begin to work on what is called the BIM program. And so this is 3D modeling for young people that are interested in potentially working in architecture, but have just not really taken that step and don't want to enroll in a formal class. But this is a way that they can work on 3D modeling and determine if they have an interest in going forward. But it's going to be a paid program that will provide training, and ultimately they'll be able to look at jobs at the end. But that's one aspect of the Plan Room. But we knew that there were significant needs for our minority contractors, and that's an area where we're looking for mentors. We're looking for people that want to volunteer and participate with us in that regard.
All right, Cardinal Call listeners, you heard it. The evangelist has spoken. She's put out the blast. All right, so we expect some volunteer hours to increase, and some mentors and some people that can help in the community. Obviously, we reach a nice audience here with our OLL program, and hopefully we can assist in any way, shape, or form. Dr. McCart, what do you have?
Well, I have a question, and I've got a background in business, so the mention of the amount of money there, I had no idea there was that much money that was already there, and I hadn't even thought of that or what a number might be. But again, going back to your website here, it mentions that an expanded range of retail goods and services and dining options will be available both for residents and non-residents. The 18th and West Broadway corridor will become a destination of choice where Louisvillians will spend their dollars. And on the commercial side of things, is there kind of an ideal state in the future here that OneWest is really working toward? Do you have a few things that you could tell us about the business and commercial aspect and the ideal future state for that?
Absolutely. So, when you look at an entity solely focused on the redevelopment and renaissance of a specific quadrant of the city, recruiting businesses is one aspect of the work. So we have a whole list of businesses and services that the community has stated they need. Most notably, of course, is grocery stores. So absent an entity that's solely focused on grocery store recruitment, OneWest is focused on a wide range of recruitment. But at the same time, we're very much focused on uplifting businesses that are there and helping minority businesses to grow and flourish. But what a lot of people don't know is with the 4,000 vacant and abandoned properties, there's a significant amount of commercial real estate that is in disrepair and in need of and long delayed maintenance and in need of acquisition and investment in maintenance and upfit, rehab specifically. With that makes you have to address the issues around absentee landlords and the concerns that tenants have around raising issues with their landlords on commercial spaces. A lot of times our tenants are quietly evicted when they raise issues around maintenance on commercial spaces. So they don't have a local advocate. OneWest has helped to serve in that regard. The other thing is with the pandemic, we had a number of businesses that were undocumented with regard to their actual financial paperwork. So they had to have help in that regard to help get not only their accounting in line, but to get to a lender that might be able to help them. So we worked very hard in that regard. The PPP funding, finding who could get to that table. There were just a number of things that tailspins that we had to get into to try to help folks locally. But with regard to the actual development work, OneWest is working on a wealth creation and equity program. We're modeling it now with a few businesses where we've actually purchased properties that those businesses wanted to either grow to or expand into. And with that, we're understanding there's such significant costs. Those businesses could not function at a net income and actually purchase, rehab, and invest in the operational cost that they would have for their businesses. So in a lot of ways, we're serving in that capacity. We're also partnering with Encore, which is a senior program of Leadership Louisville. Encore is working with us to define and acquire resources for some of our local businesses. So as we do the evaluation process for some of our businesses to determine where they could locate, if where they're wanting to locate, they could actually afford that space. If they can afford it today, but could potentially afford it in the future, we look at what kind of system we need to put in place to help them grow into the purchase of those spaces. And so that requires that you have to look at, and I know Dr. McCart, you're familiar with this, you have to look at their business plan model and try to define where the gaps are and how you can help them with their forecasting. And then what does that mean in regard to the professional services that need to be around them to help them grow and plan for that future growth? And so we're also working, some of our businesses are being referred to AMP and the new incubator that AMP is developing. We're going to be working very closely with GLI and their business incubator with regard to minority procurement. And so we want to make sure that our minority businesses have the ability to get to the resources they need, and that where we can provide resources, making sure we're there to do that. But I will say this, I believe that people have to give credence to the fact that small business owners are not developers. And if they're trying to grow their business, it can pull them so far away to try to develop a building and or to try to make it cost effective for them, that it could make them fail on the operations side. So that's why we're here. That's why you need a CDC. And then also, because of the lack of maintenance and repairs and things of that nature for the historic, a lot of the buildings are historic in the West End. Because of the lack of investment, you have to have an entity that can provide that subsidy. And so that's why we're trying to raise money to help make this an easier transition for many of those businesses. And they deserve to own. They deserve to have the increased asset value on their balance sheet at some point. And we've got to make sure that that happens. That's all a part of the restoration of economic justice. And so I do think that, if you come and sit around our table, you're going to hear a lot of things. And this is what we're working toward. And it is a deep dive. It's serious because redlining was serious. And when you talk about years and years of that disinvestment, you gotta play the long game. You can't play chess on a situation that you can't play checkers on a situation that requires you play chess. And so we just are here for the long game and to try to help the community grow and develop in the right way.
Well, that's I'm glad to hear you expound on those things, and thank you again for evangelizing, as Dr. Owens might say. But no, that's good news, and that there's someone there to help them, because entrepreneurship is just so hard. I mean, the word is a French word that means one who takes risks, and so it's risky enough trying to, if you're a clothing manufacturer or a baker or whatever your skill may be, when you become that entrepreneur, you have to learn how to, you've got to be an accountant, to marketing, human resources, all those things, much less a developer, as you're talking about in these situations. So I'm just so glad to hear that there is an entity there that has the resources and the knowledge that can help a number of people, so they can focus on what it is that they're good at and what they got into business for in the first place, so they can have a higher probability of succeeding. Dr. Owens?
Yeah, so Ms. Smith, you alluded to the pandemic. And so my next question is real simple, is just what are some of the positives that you have learned from COVID, pertaining to OneWest or the West End? What has, and I mean, and I say that from the standpoint of, a lot of times when COVID is mentioned, it's always the doom and gloom and the bad part of it. But I know there has to be something we can learn and take from the pandemic, and maybe some of the setbacks or some of the setups for, a comeback or a bounce back or revival. So what are some of the positives that you have learned from COVID?
Well, I would definitely say preparation is key. In business, business school, you always learn that forecasting is important. Well, I think that for many companies, no one would have forecast something as dire as the pandemic. We were hit in 2007. We started seeing some evidence of the ultimate economic downturn of 2008, and it lasted, at least for many companies, at least 5 years or so. And so it's, how do you prepare for those kinds of things? And I will say step one is to make sure that we are all documenting in the right way our financials, and to just make sure that we have the kinds of statements and the kinds of tax recording that's necessary. So if for any reason our government does do some of the types of things that were done with the pandemic and offering the PPP, that we're in position for those kinds of things. The other thing is, even on the grant side, most of the institutions wanted to see financial statements, or wanted to see projections, or wanted to see your last tax return. So I think for our small businesses, it was just really making sure that they're in position to provide the right financial documentation, in any environment, good or bad. And so I think it's trying to make sure we help our small businesses come from recording under the table to recording above, the table, in the way that most financial institutions recognize, as well as the government, so that they can be in position for any resources that may become available. The other thing is to inform small businesses and even our residents. Don't be ashamed if you've been through hard times. Everybody has. And the one thing I try to remind African Americans in business is, if white companies are going through pneumonia, Black companies are typically going through a tsunami. And so to understand that, and to know that you have a right to say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. Can you help me? Don't be afraid to do that, so that you can get all the help that you need, and you can begin to get to your next level, because it's doable and possible. I've seen it over the course of the last 30 years many times, and I know that there is a very beautiful horizon on the coming over the mountain, and we just have to really position ourselves as a community for that, and I think it's possible.
I understand. That's great. That's great. Dr. McCart, you want to chime in?
Sure. I just move on to a related question here, and time's just flying when you're having fun, I guess. So, and when you're learning a lot, certainly. So you mentioned earlier, Ms. Smith, about some of the healthcare and some of the basic human needs that are not being met as well. as they should be, and how that's been exacerbated by the social unrest and by the pandemic. And this question really goes to, how do you measure progress or success, and what do some of those things look like in terms of measuring? Because we've got a lot of data out there, but sometimes it's hard to separate um, the trivial many from the vital few. And so, how do you use data? What does your team look at in terms of enhancing access to services such as health and safety and technology that's going on out there? So,
Right.
could you tell us a little bit about that in your leadership style?
Well, I will say this: we're very careful to make sure we don't overestimate expectations with regard to what we can do. So it is a collaborative effort among all of the community to address those concerns and those issues. We don't provide specific technology training outside of the accelerator for the minority contractors. So we do refer to groups that do. But in terms of the work that we do, how we measure success is we look at the barometers around how many businesses have been retained in the community, how many businesses have grown their balance sheet and their income in the community. We want to look at the end of the day, as we do recruitment and business growth and development, how many of our West End businesses are still in business and able to say, hey, they've grown over the course of whatever amount of time that we're looking at. The other barometer that we look at is how many people have been hired. And so that's very important. And so we're working with the mayor's task force around procurement under the leadership of MSD, the leader of MSD and LG&E. And it's very interesting to see that there is a very collaborative effort around measuring these same things amongst over 40 businesses in the city. And I will also say that GLI is also doing some of this same work with its membership. So I think that OneWest is on the right track with regard to these things. But again, I don't want to put out that we do it all. We don't. We're very focused, but in our real estate, we also are measuring how many square feet we are able to impact change with. So, right now we're involved in over 200,000 square feet, either owned or under contract or invested in. And so we will be looking at, from 3 years ago to, going forward, how many square feet of commercial property we've been able to affect change with regard to restoration, with regard to maybe in some cases demolition and new development and things of that nature. And then the overall economic impact with regard to investment in the West End. And so all of those things are on our list in addition to some others.
That was a great answer. And I think that's important as leaders to realize what we can do, what we're not able to focus on at this time, but to still be a convener of that information as it relates to something that's maybe outside the scope of your particular project and organization. So, well, I've learned a lot, Dr. Owens, and I'm sure you have too. Why don't I hand it back over to you as we start to wrap up here? Oh, yeah, I've got some more questions.
The evangelist has really told us a lot about OneWest. I would advise anybody listening to us, if you think you can help or want to volunteer. She has not said this. I'll say it for her. Hopefully I don't get in trouble. Check out the website, volunteer, help. She's doing some phenomenal things. She has told you everything that they are looking at, how you can assist, how you can help. But one thing we always do, Ms. Smith, before we let you go, we always have a little bit of fun with our guests, right? So I have several questions. I'm just going to pick one. So my fun question for you, and if you answer fast, maybe I'll pick two, but this is the one I'm going to go with, right? Okay. If your life was the title of a book, made up or real, what would it be and why?
The oppressor I see looks like me.
Ooh, wow.
Okay. So you got to tell us why. You can't just drop that heavy nugget on us and just walk away.
Right. So it's because it encompasses the limitation on your own mind.
Mhm.
It also encompasses the holding each other accountable, people of color specifically, accountable for uplifting each other as opposed to demonizing one another and playing into a system of oppression. And so at some point, we have to push back on our history and on the legacy of slavery, where it causes us to damnify one another. And so I think that that's one reason I would title it that way.
Okay, that's amazing. I'm not going to ask you the second question, but I will give you this as the closing thought. So, what is your wise counsel for the community of Louisville for the rest of 2021?
Stop the crime.
Wow. Okay. That's it. That's what we can do. That's how we can
If we can get
move forward.
if we can get that done, I think we can get a heck of a lot of other things done. But we've got to stop the crime. That the trauma of the violence in our communities is off the chart. And I think it's going to be a lot harder to move our community forward when they are suffering from so much trauma and fear.
Well, Miss Smith, I have, AKA the evangelist. I hope you don't mind that I gave you a nickname. I know, so if people see you on the street and start calling you the evangelist, you know that they're Cardinal Call podcast listeners. I thank you for taking time out of your day. Dr. McCart, is there anything you want to end with Ms. Smith?
I'll just say that this is great work. Keep it up. We're just proud to have you in this community. I grew up my whole life just an hour from here, and all of our news stations were from the Louisville area. So even way out in the country, that we got the Louisville news. So thank you for everything you're doing to improve the community and raise up some areas that have been studied, but maybe action hasn't been taken. So we heard about a lot of action today, and we're just proud of you and thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. I'm proud to call Louisville home.
Hey, we know the West End is in good hands with you running OneWest. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Dr. McCart, can we say enough about that interview?
Well, we can try. We sure like to talk. It's a couple guys that get in front of a microphone each week do like to talk, so we'll give it a try. But there is a lot of potential in West Louisville based on the things that I heard there, and I'm still $500 million in that community leaving. A lot of it leaving, not all of it, but that's tremendous. And just from the leadership tips of getting people around the table, not leading alone, leveraging the community and other leaders, finding a way to build trust and honesty and transparency, because the young people see right through that. And I know that's true. I've got a couple young nephews that they don't want to hear anything that I've got to say unless it's something real talk that they're interested in. So,
right.
I mean, just the business things that they're doing there, the commercial properties, business incubators, there's a ton of stuff going on. I think this will just be the beginning, hopefully, of what our listeners learn and decide to take part in West Louisville. So what about you? What were some things you enjoyed?
Man, before I answer that question, I just want to go ahead and give a shout out to the OLL program at the University of Louisville. The OLL program here at the University of Louisville fosters leadership, learning, and performance to provide relevant solutions for a changing world. We offer programs at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral level. Our programs educate professionals who focus on leadership, organizational development, human resources, and workforce development in order to benefit individuals, organizations, and society. You can check us out at uofl.me/ELEOD-OLL. Again, that's uofl.me/ELEOD-OLL. Listen, our program summarizes everything that Miss Evon Smith is doing in that one sector of town, right? We are about leadership opportunities. We're about organizational learning. We're about workforce development. They're hiring. I mean, that's when she said that's a stat they're tracking. You know, who is being hired, right? They're tracking who can do what, making sure if you're a business, if you're quote unquote an entrepreneur who's a leader, right, that you don't get disenfranchised or you don't get a bad name or you don't even get silently evicted, right? Those are things that the OneWest, community development corporation, they're doing every single day. And like you said, the amount of money that was leaked out or is being leaked out of the West End, if that were just to stay in that West End, I would imagine some more great things can happen, which I think the OneWest is trying to do. They're trying to stop that slow bleed. But I know that is, like you said, it's a deep dive. It's a large task. I think that the learning they're trying to do with partnering with the architectural firm so that students can learn 3D modeling and how to take advantage of that so they can improve their lives. The wealth creation. I mean, we could go on and on. I don't want to take up all the time and all the air out the room, but I mean, I think that that is just phenomenal. I don't think that they're anything short of amazing. That's my opinion. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and there's a quote I like that's about if you're thinking long term, you educate the people. Mm-hmm. And they're doing so much of that with the young people, helping them learn these hands-on skills that can help them. They're educating entrepreneurs on different aspects. They're educating the community on things that are going on that could be swept under the rug in different circumstances. And so I'm, as educators, you and I can appreciate that, and our listeners as well, that we're bringing things to light and getting information out there for the benefit of everybody. And it's a little bit of an uncomfortable topic, but she said, "Stop the crime. We've got to work together and stop the crime." And I thought those were some powerful words to end on, because that one thing can really help in ways that a lot of other things can. I mean, that's a great starting point. So yeah, I appreciate how she wasn't afraid to face the difficult topics and to share so much about her leadership there. So great guest, and I look forward to having her back in a year or so and seeing where they've come since our interview.
Oh, most definitely, 100%. I'm so excited. Well, as we say around here, right, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. When you teach, you never know how many lives you will influence. And there is no doubt in my mind that OneWest and Miss Evon Smith is doing a lot of influencing and changing lives, not just on the West End. You can't help but have a trickle down effect in that, no matter what. And so, Cardinal Nation, right? As we wrap up today, keep leading, keep learning, keep influencing. We hope to see you soon and hear from you soon. But until then, don't forget to like, subscribe, download, figure out ways to contact us and get in contact with us so you're updated with new podcasts that drop every Friday and information connected to the OLL program. Until then, take care and stay safe.